Please don't leave another comment that
What's
I'm
up,
wearing
everyone?
orange makeup. I'm just turning orange. How can I help myself when all of the tariffs that are supposed to destroy the economy and push us into a recession keep getting
Watching
walked
some
back,
Kevin. We're gonna
almost
watch
as
this and
if
see if
all
I
of the
agree with it or
tariffs
not.
were just designed to be a big negotiation after all, like we thought during the campaign, but then didn't believe it. Well, I guess we'll see what happens. But today I'm going to provide you an update on exactly what's going on with the tariffs,
Why are you talking
along
like
with
that,
what
though? That's
Donald
kinda weird.
Trump is saying, and a full breakdown of what Neil Kashkari just said at the Federal Reserve. I'll provide some other updates as well. I'm going to keep this one concise because it's a holiday and I want you to go do whatever it is you're doing. Thank you for watching. By the way, if for whatever reason you decide, you know what, Kevin, if I could only take advantage of a Memorial Day to book a coaching call with Kevin, I would do it. I'm actually launching that. If you go to the link down below, you're going to see you can book a 40-minute coaching call with Kevin. It'll be a Zoom audio call, so audio, not video, but we'll record it with Opus AI so you can get your recording and summation. You can always reference it again. Just make sure you apply the coupon code Memorial Day, okay? It's 31% off. I'm only doing it today. I want to see how I'm a little bored right now, okay? The next 30 days are going to be a little boring for me.
Sure.
So I'm going to book some coaching calls only.
For sure. I said sure.
Offering this today on Memorial Day, and if we like it, maybe we'll bring it back. And we don't have infinite slots for this either, so go check that out. It's linked down below, and you'll go to this screen, then you press enroll now. Just make sure, apply that, just type in Memorial Day. Okay, cool. All right, so Donald Trump this weekend suggested that he would delay the imposition of the European Union tariffs on the, European Union to July 9th, which is also the same day that Liberation Day's 90-day extension expires. Now, this is really good because last week the European Union actually sent a proposal to the United States, which the United States outright rejected. This comes at the same time as the European Union is threatening tariffs on around $25 billion of goods, threatening tariffs on another $90 billion worth of goods. So in other words, the European Union is threatening a lot of retaliatory tariffs, while at the same time Donald Trump has publicly expressed that he's frustrated with how the Europeans are negotiating. This is also coming at the same time as we have these reduced tariffs on China of 30%, which we hope are going to get negotiated even lower, but ultimately we don't know. Are we going to sit at a 10% base level, or are tariffs going to end up moving up substantially? For right now, it looks like we have basically bought ourselves all of June for those trailing stops to keep going to the freaking moon. And I'm just going to be clear here. There's very little evidence of true damage occurring to the economy at the moment. Now, there are pockets of damage, delinquencies amongst lower income earners, but we've seen that ever since excess savings have evaporated. Broadly, the economy, whether it's propped up by artificial intelligence or corporate buybacks and spending, whatever it is, the rich people spending, whatever it is, the economy just keeps booming. Now, we'll see, obviously, where we end up by July 9th, and this is why we've got to talk about what Neil Kashkari just said. It is worth noting that future...
There it goes, better.
Just so you know, futures are open on Sunday, even if the next day is a holiday. So futures still trade. Futures were up 1% on the news of this sort of tariff reprieve until July 9th with the European Union on Sunday. So like the NASDAQ was up 1%, for example. This, again, comes after last week. Donald Trump said, we're going to raise tariffs to 50%. And the EU proposal for negotiations was flat out rejected. Now everybody's taking a different tone. But what's interesting is you should pay attention to what the European Union is doing. They're saying, oh yeah, July 9th, this is perfect. This will give us time to work something out. In the meantime, they're trying to cozy up not only to China, but to other countries to strengthen the euro. Because in the future, they actually think the euro could replace the dollar. And we knew the afro wasn't going to make it when that proposal came, but there was actually a time where African countries were thinking about forming the African Union and then coming up with the Afro currency. So there's a lot of talk about replacement currencies for the US dollar. Obviously, we've heard this with BRICS before. And part of me wonders if during this sort of 90-day pause time, our enemies or sort of our former allies and our enemies are coordinating against us. I really hope not. I really hope, like I said at the beginning of the video, that these are just negotiations, we get rid of tariffs. And that's exactly what Neil Kashkari says as well. Neil Kashkari says, look, we are talking, and this is interesting, it's the forward-looking data that you should really pay attention to. And technically, it's not really data, it's more like anecdotal. But anyway, he had this like 20-minute interview, okay, maybe it was 10 minutes, it just felt really long and boring. He's like, uncertainty may weigh on the economy. All right, we've heard all this crap before, like I don't want to reiterate all this boring crap to you, I want to respect your time. So the thing I thought was really interesting is he says, we are hearing from our business contacts that our businesses are making contingency plans should uncertainty continue, and that would include significant layoffs as a potential. And so he says, look, if tariffs are just going to be, 10% and all of the higher numbers are really just a negotiated level, maybe things will be fine and the stagflationary impact on our economy will be small. But if we end up negotiating or settling with tariffs substantially higher, then we can have real problems, and those layoffs may hit at the same time inflation stays sticky. Now, it's worth noting that Waller last week said that the Fed sort of has a base case that tariffs will end up settling somewhere around an average of 18%. Now, they seem to think that could actually sustain a rate cut by the end of the year. I kind of think across the board 18% tariffs is going to weigh on our economy quite a bit, which I'm trying to align, like, is he thinking, 18% is just going to keep inflation like decently low, but a little higher than where it would have been, but then they need to cut because the economy is going to slow because of that 18%. That kind of aligns a little bit with what Kashkari's saying, whereas, Kashkari's like, it all depends on where the tariffs settle. Fine. But so far, even Kashkari says, so far the labor market's holding up, so we're just going to wait and see. September might even be too soon to cut, which is really interesting. So obviously we'll see. So far we just get a big kick of the can down the road by Donnie T, which bodes really well for trailing stops. And we'll be talking about that like we were last week. We're like, look, you set trailing stops on these EU tariff announcements, you won't get hit until you're out like, 4 to 10% on certain stocks. Nothing actually went down that level as far as of the stocks that I was watching, because people immediately bought the dip before there was a dip. And now futures being up 1% implies we're just going to kind of keep going. This is what we've been saying for the last 30 days. Like, hey, even if you're bearish on the economy in the medium term, like I kind of am, I think, over the next year, we could fall into a recession unless things, really start cooking again, which I hope they do. I'd rather not fall into recession. But, in the very, very short term, like I said 30 days ago, even over the next 30 days until Liberation Day, Liberation Day 2.0, I'm not expecting any bad data. Now, that said, Donald Trump, I also want to know, and Kashkari. Kashkari also says crypto is speculation, whatever. Donald Trump threatened to divert Harvard money to trade schools. I actually thought this was really interesting. And I've talked about Harvard before. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the research money, getting deleted from our, research institutions that are researching quantum mechanics or cancers or whatever.
Okay, well, it
especially
depends on what they
studies have been going on for decades. Those make me a little nervous when we start cutting from science, but I get the whole, Harvard versus divert the money elsewhere argument. And I want to say, remember in 2021 when I ran for governor in California, what did I pitch? I called it future schools. And future schools would integrate trade schools into high school, so that way when you graduate at 18, you could go work as a journeyman electrician or plumber or carpenter or whatever, framer. Right? That's what we need. And now with AI, we need even more of that. I've been talking about that for 4 years. So hearing Donald Trump suggest that we should spend money on trade school, absolutely love it. In fact, I think he should include it in the Big Beautiful Bill, but that's not tentatively in the Big Beautiful Bill, but whatever. Also, quick correction and retraction. Apparently the IRS deems cash tips in the Big Beautiful Bill as including credit card transactions, which is really weird to me because when I worked at Red Robin, cash tips were the tips that you got in cash, and then you would have to go to the terminal and report them. Well, most people, if they got a $10 tip, they'd put like $1 as a tip in
Worth it,
because
worth
they
it.
just didn't want to pay taxes on the $9.
I think it's worth it.
That, which did make it harder for them to qualify for a home, and technically is against the law. You know, they should have been reporting that. But that was just a very common standard. People wouldn't report their cash tips. Credit card tips are automatically reported to the IRS, and they're part of your paycheck or whatever. Well, apparently, the IRS deems cash tips, credit card, and cash tips, which is really good for servers because it would actually reduce your overall taxation on even credit card tips, which is cool. And I think it's somewhere around 60-40 in terms of cash 60% and 40% credit card tips, although I think that's going to flip over to more CCs over time here. Anyway, then we've got Merz of Deutschland giving the green light for Ukraine to strike deeper into Russia. This is really the European Union trying to exert their dominance and push, you know, the European Union into further support for Ukraine against Russia. I thought it was really interesting, but Poland actually has the largest army in Europe right now outside of Russia, which I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed it was like France or Germany or something like that. So I thought that was very interesting. Also, with that, thank you for those of you who are emailing me asking about the deadline for investing in House Hack. I had an email this morning, for example. Somebody's like, hey, I'm on a cruise. Like, am I going to be okay? Yes, don't worry. No expiration plan for investing in House Hack between now and at least the next Fed meeting, and I'll give you at least 2-week notice. We're not going to keep it open forever because we think over time broader interest rates will fall, and then we're going to get rid of this 5% offer. But if you want to lock that in, the only benefit to investing earlier until the round is closing for House Hack is you start collecting that 5% sooner, which some people want to do because, you know, stocks are pretty high. So I know some people are sort of diversifying a little bit. Other people are waiting for those trailing stops to hit, and I'm totally respecting of that as well, because again, that's what we've been advocating as sort of, you know, broader financial suggestion, not personalized financial advice. Anyway, risk with every investment. Make sure to read the paperwork. Thank you so very much for watching.
I ran into that
coaching call in the first link in the description down below. And folks, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much. Goodbye, and have a wonderful Memorial Day. Bye.
Peace.
Let me tell you, working on a game.
Let's do that. Bro, I can't do Joe Rogan. Let's see this real quick.
Godzilla wasn't a movie. It was a documentary about saltwater crocodiles. That's the largest crocodile in the world, getting up to 20 feet long and 2,400 pounds. That's the weight of an SUV and the length of a limousine. They also have a 3,700 pound bite force, which is 5 times the bite force of, I don't know, a lion. They also have better hearing than humans, directional smelling, which means they could smell which direction their prey is, built-in motion detectors, and they could communicate with other crocodiles to have them help them hunt. Here's a fun fact.
I didn't know that.
Did you know that during World War II, 1,000 Japanese soldiers went to war with saltwater crocodiles?
Yeah, they died.
Won. In other words, there's regular crocodiles, and then there's these. That's the final boss. Godzilla wasn't a movie. It was a documentary about saltwater crocodile.
Are grizzly bears scarier than crocs? Nah.
How do they do it? I can't do
my
that.
character around, but I want you to be ready.
Are
you ready,
that?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Goblin shot. What the fuck is that?
Oh, it gets worse.
Oh.
It gets worse. Let me take off my helmet.
What is that?
I'm gonna turn my character around, but
If I needed 100,000 wood to get one level, then... What the f*** is going on?
Is this moving?
If I needed 100,000 wood to get...
Don't you want a better gaming PC that's built with the right hardware at a fair price? Build Rita.
I think that's too much. We're on 30 now. This guy's an idiot. I saw this one. I need a. Yeah, that guy's retarded. I'm looking for just like a little documentary or something you could throw on. Mac and mine. You're skipping this. The secret of truly huge arms. Let's see. I like looking at these too.
Don't upload your videos to YouTube. Upload to Restream, where we will live stream it to YouTube and all your platforms at once.
Masturbation just isn't enough, and you need bigger forms so you can feel more masculine.
Yeah, wait, hold on. What he said. Go back.
Masturbation just isn't enough, and you need bigger forearms so you can feel more masculine and have giant arms. Well, good news. I have 5 of my favorite forearm exercises, and none of them involve flicking the bean. What? Let's go check them out.
Flick of the wrist.
You might already know this, but big arms are the unlock to everything you've ever wanted in your life. A new career, a new girlfriend, a new boyfriend, a new family, a trip on the Blue Origin rocket to the edge of space. You can have all of them with jacked arms. And if you want to get juicy forearms, there are 2 ways to do it. One way is the old-fashioned way. That's right, the M word, the thing you do online by yourself with the websites you're not supposed to go to in the evening and in the morning, sometimes just after lunch. But the other way is to actually train your forearms. If you want bigger forearms, I promise you, filling them out is going to make everything about you look better. You'll feel better. You're going to be awesome. You're going to have friends. This intro is way too long. Mike, shut up and show us your top 5 favorite forearm exercises. You got it.
Forearms.
The first exercise on my list is the seated 2-arm at a time dumbbell wrist curl. One thing that really helps in wrist curl and in forearm training is really accentuating, at least for the first few months that you train, that peak contraction just to connect with your muscles. It's helped me a ton because I used to need a lot of volume on these, but now I need much less because I'm just better at contracting that musculature. Peak hold for a second, and then a nice slow eccentric lowering of the weight until they're just at the edge of your fingertips, and then back up and again. You can use any range of weights for this, but in my typical experience with almost all of these exercises, sets of 15 to 30 repetitions per set are really where it's at. Why? The range of motion is so small, the total amount of time spent per repetition on forearms is tiny. If you think about, well, 5 reps in the squat can get you to grow muscle, but if you time out 5 reps in the squat, that's like 25 seconds. And if you do these reps, that's like 20 reps of wrist curls. So sets of 15 and above are usually very good. Anything below that ends up being heavy and weird and kind of feels strange on your wrist. It doesn't give you a pump. It doesn't get you very sore. So my best advice for all these exercises, go light. And for this exercise, it's no exception. My next favorite forearm exercise, or one that gets the job done anyway, is the barbell wrist curl. I prefer to do it in a power rack because it's the most pathetic small muscle of the human body, which no one cares about. And then you occupy the rack for competitive powerlifters and peach gang muscle mommies, the people that really need to be using the rack. I kid, of course, but if you're a trillionaire like me and you own one of 500 of your own gyms in every municipality in the world, you can afford to do this sort of thing. Let's talk about this exercise. There's not a lot of glamour to this exercise, and it's done almost exactly like our last exercise, except with a barbell. The thing I would say that's challenging about this exercise is you don't want any friction of the barbell rubbing up against your thighs. So you're gonna do this thing where you come forward with your hips just enough to let the barbell hang. You're gonna go all the way down until it's on your tippy fingers, and you're gonna come up for a 1-second pause at the top, and that's basically the barbell wrist curl. And this setup is excellent for myo reps. Do as many of these as you can, rest 2 to 3 seconds, do as many as you can, rest 2 or 3 seconds, do 2 or 3 rounds like that, rest a minute, do that several times. Your forearms can take a huge beating, and they need a bunch of reps, and they need a bunch of failure proximity. Don't just do 3 sets of 8 and leave the gym. A bunch of sets of total per set with all the myo reps in there, 15 to 25 reps, you'll be money.
Cash money. I said big money.
If you have a free motion dual cable cross machine, you are in luck because you can purchase a crossbar, attach it to both ends, and do the free motion straight bar wrist curl. What? That sounds ridiculous. Why? Mike, you're an idiot. You're short, you're balding, you're in your 40s, you're Jewish on top of that. Not an insult, but it could be. Have you just gone insane? Why not just do regular cable wrist curls? Well, a good cable attachment you could do. The problem is a lot of cable attachments on a regular cable station have a lot of friction when you try to spin the bar. But with this attachment, we have almost none. This is an exercise I love. It's a nice thick bar, and I'm able to just get a really good purchase on it. It's well knurled, and I'm able to crunch at the top and do a real big stretch at the bottom. It sits in a mid-range. It's perfect for myo reps. This is a phenomenal, phenomenal way to train forearms. And here, why so much variation? Couldn't you do one of these? You could. but you get bored, your body gets used to the same thing. So exercises like this and the one we have after are really good things to throw in your program every now and again to switch things up, keep you fresh mentally, keep you fresh physically, keep your forearms growing and engorged with blood, veins, and the good girl, bad girl machine's like, oh my God, like your forearms look like two giants. Well, you know what she's gonna say. Exercise number 4 is the one-arm bench wrist curl. This one's really cool because it allows you to experience significantly more tension at the stretch than most of the other movements do. And that's really awesome because it probably grows you more. It also allows you to really maintain an awesome mind-muscle connection because it isolates everything out. You can only focus on your forearms. Make sure that you're going all the way down for a deep stretch, but as you come up, you don't have to come all the way up. You could just stop right at parallel and come right back down. Sets of 15 to 25 reps are really, really good here on a first set. But what I like to do is do whichever arm for me is the kind of the weaker arm. My right hand, for obvious reasons, has bigger forearms. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do my left first. Let's say I get 17 reps. Immediately with no rest, I pass over to my right, 17 reps. Immediately with no rest, I pass over and do however many reps I can with that left, and back and forth and back and forth. Why? One, the weaker arm anchors the repetitions and makes sure that it gets closer to failure because it's more capable, and thus over time it'll balance out your forearm size. Another thing is, while one forearm is resting, the other one is working, and vice versa, which is super cool because then you can squish a lot of time down when, as soon as you get the dumbbell in your hands for this exercise, you are working, either with one arm or the other arm. What I like to do, my last tip, is as I'm working out my forearms, if a guy, especially, or maybe a girl walks by that I happen to like and they make accidental eye contact with me, which you never see me in public, never do, I like to do a couple things. Fucking like, what's up? Give one of those, or just one of these. Or my favorite, the double wink. Or my personal, absolute favorite, the cold stare as they walk by. Ready?
Make a decision.
Oh, I thought that was it.
Well,
I'm just fixing stuff while I'm waiting.
It creeps people out. Last forearm exercise that I have to share with you guys is what I call the bar push off. It's a weird exercise. Like, it's weird. You're gonna get stares at the gym. People are gonna ask you questions. You're not gonna know how to answer them. Just send those people to our YouTube and maybe we'll just monetize. I don't know how that helps you, but at least you don't have to explain a weird exercise. But I do. Jesus, here we go. This exercise, you basically get into a push-up position and you press off of a bar that's somewhere between knee height and kind of upper tummy height, depending on how strong you are or how blasted your forearms are already from all the other extracurricular stuff you've been doing. You know what I'm talking about. You're gonna do a partial rep to a really deep stretch, and you're gonna come back up about the midway point. After the midway point, you either slip off the bar or there's basically no tension. So it's these weird half reps you're doing at the full stretch, midway point, full stretch, midway point. If you hold that full stretch for a second or two, it really helps. The good news is tension at a very good stretch. The not so great weird news is that counting reps is kind of weird. You don't really know if it's a rep or not. So what I would recommend is this. Choose a total number of reps that is typical of your forearm workouts. Let's say earlier in the week you did some dumbbell wrist curls. I got 62 total reps on for all sets. Set a priority of 60 repetitions, and with as many myo-rep breaks, 5-second breaks or so between sets, get 60 total done. You don't even have to split these up into sets. And make sure you're really milking that eccentric and milking that bottom stretch for a few seconds. That is gonna get you crazy pumped. How do you periodize this and progress through it? Add reps every time. 60 in week 1, 65 in week 2, 70 total in week 3, and so on and so forth. Is this something you do all the time? No.
Yeah,
if you're bored and just tired of doing all the other forearm stuff, this thing rips, and it's actually quite effective. Make sure you're nice and stable so you don't slip off the bar and embarrass yourself in front of muscle mommy. But if you do embarrass yourself, just act like you're really, really upset, so she'll come over and cuddle you. Folks, those are some of my favorite forearm exercises. Feel free to try them. Try my reps, try my rep matching, try different reps, try different sets. One quick tip is you just don't need a lot of rest between forearm training sets. As soon as your forearms aren't so pumped out of their mind and so crampy and so full of lactic acid that you can't contract your hand, you're good to go. really 5 or 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds rest between sets is awesome for most of these cases. And the best news is you're gonna get vascular, you're gonna get better endurance, and then that one hobby you love to do that you do all by yourself, you're gonna be better at it. Go, do that hobby, not on YouTube, another kind of tube. See you guys over there.
Over ready? I guess that was quick. Forearm workout. What else we got? Do this real quick.
Just a reminder that the caracal is the most underrated cat in the world. First off, they basically have bionic ears. Those things can probably hear your thoughts, which is completely unnecessary considering they can also run 50 miles an hour. That makes them the second fastest cat in the world behind a cheetah. The only way you're getting away from them is if you have wings. Okay, I lied. Wings don't help. They have an 11-foot vertical jump, the highest in the animal kingdom. In fact, they've been documented catching up to 12 birds in one jump. That's serial hunting. Just a reminder that the caracal is the...
I did not know that. Hold on, I don't know if I answered it right now. Scrolling. Let's look at these.
The PlayStation is home to nearly 100 RPGs of varying subgenres in the US alone, making it an incredible system for RPGs. Many games saw wild success in the PS1 and are remembered fondly, but some were destined to, fall into obscurity. These are the other PS1 games that, to me, are the most obscure, and I'll be listing them in the order of least obscure to most obscure in my experience. Here we go. Now, just because it has a recognizable name from a huge franchise, I'm starting with Tornado, The Last Hope. Right off the bat, this opening cinematic looks so amazing compared to so many others on this list. I love the charm of it. Released in 2000 by Enix, Tornado, The Last Hope is a dungeon-crawling roguelike that stars the unlikely hero, Tornado Taloon. Tornado is the lovable merchant from Dragon Quest IV, in case you think you might have seen him around. Where most RPGs of the era focused on epic battles and world-ending threats, Tornado zooms in on the everyday courage of a pot-bellied shopkeeper braving treacherous, randomly generated dungeons in search of treasure.
It's honest work.
It's a humble game with a humble hero, and that's part of what makes it so neat. Let's go ahead and address this feature or issue, according to where you stand on difficulty. This game is brutal. Tornado is not a traditional RPG where you grind, level up, and become a god, going back to destroy the things that were in your path before. It's a roguelike through and through. Each time you enter a dungeon, your level resets to 1. If you die, you lose all of your items, and sometimes, your dignity. It can be frustrating, sure, but there's a compelling loop underneath the punishment. Slowly but surely, you're building a stronger base of equipment, learning how the dungeons work, and working on your storehouse that makes each return trip just a little more successful. The core gameplay revolves around turn-based movement and combat within procedurally generated floors. Now, I've often seen this style of the game referred to as turn-based, and I guess it technically is, but the idea of turn-based evokes in me a sense of like Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, not this walk and they walk setup, hit and they hit. Now that I'm explaining it out loud, it kind of sounds odd to me. But there's probably a better word for this setup than turn-based. Now, I'm just not sure what to call it. Let me know in the comments if you know. What happens is enemies only move when you do. So careful planning and inventory management is critical. Every decision, whether to use a scroll, eat some bread, throw a cursed item, or risk going down another floor, feels meaningful. And that's the real hook, the give and the take. Every dive into the dungeon feels like a puzzle, and victory comes through strategy, not brute force. And it's addictive. You might say that this is the Dark Soul.
Don't say it.
What elevates Tornado beyond a standard roguelike is its personality. The game is surprisingly funny and charming. Torneko himself is endearing with a joyful naivete and a clear love for his family and his village. Between dungeon runs, you return to your village where you slowly build a bigger house, unlock shops, and interact with townspeople. It gives the game a cozy rhythm, tense dungeon crawl, quiet village life, and then repeat. If you've played Moonlighter, I feel like Torneko dungeon crawled so that game could dungeon crawl.
I hate these commercials. Wow.
Get 3 times points on travel and dining. On everything you eat, everywhere you go. With Chase Sapphire Reserve. Make more of what's yours.
This setup makes it all the more satisfying when you finally bring back a rare item or overcome a boss. It's just a good loop, which is a huge compliment. Visually, aside from that banger opening cutscene, the game's pretty modest. The graphics are 2D sprites on 3D backdrops, and while they won't blow anyone away, they're colorful and they're clean. The enemy designs pulled straight from the Dragon Quest universe are whimsical and instantly recognizable. The music and sound effects is, well, you know, it's Dragon Quest. It's delightful and it's familiar. You have your charming village themes and tense dungeon motifs that feel right at home with the franchise. Torneko The Last Hope is a proper weird title, no doubt. It's a roguelike that doesn't coddle the player, but it rewards patience and persistence. For fans of Dragon Quest, or for those curious about this style of gameplay, it offers a surprisingly deep and satisfying experience. No, it won't be for everyone, but for the right player, it's not just a test of luck and skill, it's an oddly charming journey about a merchant who just refuses to give up. Torneko is admittedly obscured, even with the Dragon Warrior title attached to it, and this next game actually has the benefit of having another game title attached to it, and that probably got it a little more attention than it rightfully deserved. I'm talking about Crusaders of Might and Magic. In 1999 for PC and 2000 for PS1, 3DO made an attempt to bring the storied Might and Magic universe into the action-adventure realm. While there was a PC and a PlayStation version, I played exclusively the PlayStation version and simply read a little about the PC version. I mean, after all, it's a PlayStation video, right? The differences aren't too wild, it seems, by my understanding. The PS1 game is just the more robust version. That's a good thing, focusing more on the RPG element. 3DO's interpretation of Might and Magic resulted in a game that was packed with lore and story, but even more so with ambition. And let's note that ambition is great to have, but it's difficult to harness into excellence, and struggle they did. You play as Drake, a gruff and grim warrior whose village was destroyed by the Legion of the Fallen, a cult-like army of the undead led by the necromancer Necrot. Left for dead and driven by revenge, Drake is saved and trained by a mysterious order, eventually stepping into a role greater than simple vengeance. The story is kind of wildly dense for a game of this type, with nods to the greater Might and Magic mythos, ancient relics, and dark magic. There are quite a lot of beats in this story. Even in the time I spent with it, it felt like one of those where you're scrambling to take notes. There's just a lot going on. Given that the game is about 11 or so hours, according to HowLongToBeat.com, the few hours I spent with it were enough to make me wonder where it was going. Like, where's this heading? When I looked up a plot synopsis, I was blown away. I didn't realize I was playing through some sort of absolute epic. And not in the great sense, it's dense. There's a lot of story happening. Unfortunately for the dense story, which isn't bad by any means, much of it is carried out by some interesting voice acting and some stiff cutscenes, which can be nostalgic, but you really have to curb your expectations to take it seriously. But if you can, it's really quite fun.
Then you're the one who slaughtered my village, killed my family.
I grimaced a few times at the voice acting of the characters, the cutscenes, and in particular the hero Drake. I don't know if there was a resurgence of Army of Darkness around this time, or if it was just fresh on the minds of the developers, but Drake certainly has that Bruce Campbell vibe going on. His idiosyncrasies are almost anachronistic feeling. If this is a medieval setting, and it might not be, maybe I'm crazy, he feels kind of out of place. If you're into that sort of kid in King Arthur's court, or even Duke Nukem A Time to Kill experience, then you're gonna love this. Gameplay is a hybrid of hack and slash action and RPG mechanics. You'll explore various regions, from cursed fortresses to underground tombs, swinging swords, casting spells, and collecting loot. There's a basic leveling system, and you'll find a variety of weapons and magical runes to experiment with. Through use, weapon skills level up and spells level up, and Drake himself gains HP, attack, and such as he levels from killing monsters. The idea is solid. It's a third-person action RPG with progression, atmospheric environments, and undead enemies to slice through or crush with a mace. But in practice, the combat lacks polish. Hit detection can feel pretty off at times, enemies sometimes soak up way too many blows, and the camera often struggles to keep up with the action in tighter corridors. which is standard fare for fully 3D video games at the time. The greatest boss is often the camera. What Crusaders excels in is atmosphere. The game treats players with gothic environments, eerie catacombs, and mystical ruins, with decent visual variety across the zones, despite the limitations of gaming at the time. The music also deserves credit. It shifts between some somber melodies and tense battle themes, helping sell that feeling that Drake is constantly treading the edge of a dark and doomed world. And it might be repetitive at times, but I found myself humming along while I was playing. It gets kind of catchy. Despite the coolness of it, there's a reason it's not as favorably remembered as other RPGs on the system. The game's technical limitations are hard to ignore. Animations, again, are pretty stiff, even for a PS1 game. Character models are angular and awkward, even for a PS1 game. And the environments, while moody, can feel repetitive and flat, despite a color swap. The Citadel in particular, holy smokes, that thing is huge. I guess the goal was to make the game feel larger than life, but it was not necessary to make the Citadel so huge and then fill it with so little. Enemy AI is also rudimentary, often relying on simple patterns or swarming tactics, but it's fun to blast them or wade through them. Still, there's a raw charm to it, especially if you're a fan of late 90s dark fantasy or were looking for something grittier than your typical JRPG fare. Drake himself, while not the most charismatic hero, does evolve somewhat as the story progresses, both as a character and as an adventurer, gaining access to...
I've got 2 life pro tips for you. 1, you could save hundreds on car insurance by switching to Mercury. 2, get luggage that's easy to recognize. Makes baggage claim a breeze. Mercury.
You can't go wrong with this lens. It feels like you're in a 90s road trip at all times. I actually really love this lens because it allows you to capture
better gear, stronger magic, that sort of stuff. He eventually comes to gain an understanding of the supernatural forces at play, which develops him beyond simple revenge. The game definitely has a sense of growth, even if the journey is hampered by awkward controls and inconsistent pacing at times. Crusaders of Might and Magic seems like an earnest attempt to create a dark fantasy action RPG on the PlayStation, and the attempt part is probably what keeps it relegated to obscurity. It lacks the refinement of its contemporaries. But there's something admirable about its ambition, a trait that I've truly come to appreciate in playing so many RPGs for these videos I've been making. For players that are willing to embrace its clunky charm and dated presentation, it offers a moody adventure with just enough bite to make the journey worthwhile, especially if you're nostalgic for the era when fantasy games were messy, mysterious, and, even a little bit broken. See, I feel like this game is kind of like Ted. I'm a little up. But once you've played it, it's hard to forget your experience with it, for better or for worse. This next game had a bit of an obscure first outing, but I guess it still had some fans out there, and so there was a sequel years later. I'm talking about Master of Monsters, Disciples of Gaia. Master of Monsters, Disciples of Gaia is a tactical RPG that aimed to carve its own path in a genre dominated by titans like Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre. Did it succeed? Not really. Not at the time, but that's okay. Released in 1998 by System Soft and published by A1 Games in North America, it's a spiritual successor to the long-running Master of Monsters series, blending grid-based strategy with monster summoning and territory control. While it never reached the popularity of its contemporaries, much like every other game on this list, Disciples of Gaia offers a different, if clunky, alternative for players craving a challenge steeped in old-school mechanics and old-school graphics. You take on the role of a young man named Iros who summons one of the Disciples of Gaia, and now you have to wage war across the continent of Gaia, battling other summoners and their armies of magical creatures. Now, the story works, functioning more as a backdrop for the strategic gameplay than as a narrative centerpiece. It revolves around power struggles, betrayal, and a few light fantasy tropes, but storytelling clearly wasn't the top priority here. Dialogue is a bit sparse, and character development is minimal, and that may disappoint RPG fans that are looking for a rich plot. You're certainly not going to find it here, friends. Where Disciples of Gaia stands out is its gameplay loop. It's specific, but hey, if you like it, you get plenty of it. Use some of the monsters onto a hex-based map, and gradually, and boy howdy, do I mean gradually, move them across terrain to seize towers, defeat enemy creatures, and ultimately take down opposing summoners. Each unit gains experience, levels up, and evolves into more powerful forms, echoing mechanics of both RPGs and strategy titles. Positioning and careful planning matter more than brute force, and every decision, whether to expand your territory or protect your summoner, can spell victory or ruin. But to be fair, I had a grand time just absolutely conquering through this map. Those fools didn't stand a chance. Monster variety is impressive, creatures ranging from traditional dragons and unicorns to more obscure beasts and magical constructs. Now, I'm a fan of the unicorn. Watching one gore something is just as magic as the unicorn itself. Each monster type has its own strengths, of course, and movement patterns and training advantages, encouraging experimentation and careful team building. But you know what? Nobody can stop a stampede of unicorns anyway. Summoners can also cast spells or unleash special attacks, giving you a way to tip the scales during critical moments. And the summoners are absolutely brutal against everything. Look at her go. Woof. Visually, the game is dated, but there's nostalgia and just old school coolness in the sprites. These sprites work on the battlefield, but part of the coolness is seeing those in those big animated art forms. They're almost goofy looking at times, but I found this really charming. The environments are fairly bland and repetitive, unfortunately, but really, it's the battles that matter, not so much the battlefield. Even for 1998, the graphics look pretty dated. What is jarringly cool is that opening cutscene, though. I thought I was in for a much higher production value than what I got in the end. They sold my little white glove self-ketchup popsicles on a hot summer day. The soundtrack is similarly unremarkable. The background music does its job, but it won't stick with you or anything. You're not gonna find the soundtrack on Spotify, and you're not gonna be missing much either. Menus are cluttered, and navigating them can be a little cumbersome, especially for newcomers to the genre. Now, I know I'm hammering down. I'm giving you a lot of negatives about this game. There are some redeeming factors to this game, but I've kind of touched on those already. So let's keep on pounding. The pacing is pretty brutal. Battles can drag, and especially if you're micromanaging multiple units across large maps. AI opponents tend to be methodical, and while the game offers a rewarding challenge, it lacks the polish or accessibility found in other tactical RPGs from the era. Like I've said about other poor AI in games, these dudes just kind of walk into the meat grinder. Look at them go. There's also no grid elevation or advanced mechanics like facing direction or counterattacks, which makes strategy feel a little more straightforward compared to deeper titles. Now, this can be a boon for people who are just getting into these types of games, but I could also recommend you several others that are better. Namely Dark Wizard, or, as you might imagine, Final Fantasy Tactics, which is not exactly the same, but it's just a good tactical game, obviously. Still, Master of Monsters Disciples of Gaia succeeds in offering something different. It's a niche experience with a clear vision, strategic, slow-paced, and focused on long-term planning over cinematic flair. For fans of old-school hex-based war games, or for anyone nostalgic for the PC-style tactics of yesteryear, this might be one to check out. For everyone else, it's a curiosity in the PlayStation's RPG catalog, a bold experiment that couldn't quite reach greatness.
How's it going?
We're getting there. I spoke to my...
Well, perfect time.
And the rabbit hole just...
Let's start it up.
Minions have spawned.
If you hear me sound the horn, the watchers have returned. If that happens, has been slain. Once. Bring an army. Bring 10 armies. Throw those damn watchers back into the abyss.
All right. We're in. My bad. Needed some water. I needed the bowl where I put this on.
It's deeper. This next game was part of a new series and later got a PS2 sequel. And it's likely a little more popular, a little more less obscure because of the association it has with the Studio Ghibli. And if you're familiar with PS1 RPGs, you might have guessed it at this point. Jade Cocoon, The Story of Tamamayu. Jade Cocoon, The Story of Tamamayu, released in 1999 in the US for the PlayStation 1, and is a distinctive RPG that combines monster-raising elements with an incredibly rich and atmospheric world.
Huh.
Incredibly rich. Developed by Genki and featuring character designs by Katsuya Kondo of Studio Ghibli fame, the game offers a beautiful and thoughtfully presented experience that makes it stand apart from other games of its day. After playing a bunch of other games on this list, this was a breath of fresh air for sure. Players assume the role of Levant, a young man destined to become a cocoon master, a guardian who captures and purifies creatures known as minions to protect his village. The narrative unfolds as Levant embarks on a quest to save his village from a mysterious curse, exploring lush forests and encountering a variety of characters along the way. The story has themes of duty, sacrifice, and the cycle of life, providing a mature and contemplative tone, and it was certainly welcome here. You know, typically these games just have some sort of excuse to pump out monsters and make them fight each other. The story feels so disconnected or of little value, but this game doesn't do that to the players. It's an RPG with an appropriate RPG story, but it uses monster raising as a vehicle for the action of the game, and that's a huge compliment. Gameplay revolves around capturing minions and merging them to create more powerful allies. The fusion system allows for a vast array of combinations that affect both the appearance and abilities of the resulting creature. This mechanic encourages experimentation and strategic planning. You have to consider elemental affinities and skill inheritance when you merge your minions. I mean, you don't want to combine two useful things and make something useless. Actually, you know what? If you do make something useless, you can just turn it into silk. And that's the currency in the game. It's kind of dark. Now, if I had more time to throw at this, I have little doubt that I'd have some kind of cocoon farm of ill repute, some real degeneracy in the exploitation of minions. But I digress. The turn-based combat system is straightforward but effective, with battles requiring thoughtful use of minions and their abilities. When you consider the combat, it's likely that it reminds you of another incredibly well-known title that included fighting battles, where you would choose some sort of other thing to fight for you. If you thought of the incredibly common game Ghostline for the NES, you're right. Visually, Jade Cocoon is a standout title on the PlayStation. The cutscene in the beginning is just like a Ghibli cartoon. The character portraits are expressive, and everything is just polished, I would argue. The game's environments are richly detailed, with pre-rendered backgrounds that evoke a sense of wonder and immersion. The game's art direction gives this game some major bonus points. It well creates a world that feels magical but grounded. The audio design, as you might expect, further enhances the game's ambiance. The soundtrack features tribal rhythms and melodic themes and complement the game's setting really well. Voice acting is present throughout, with performances that convey the emotional weight of the narrative. Sound effects during combat are impactful, and it all adds up to the overall immersion in the game. Of course, Jade Cocoon has some flaws. The game's controls, reminiscent of like tank controls you might call them, can feel a little survival horror-esque during exploration. The main story is relatively short, which I think is a good thing, with some players completing it well under 20 hours. There is an inclusion called the Eternal Corridor that's a post-game dungeon with randomly generated levels and minions. It offers some extended gameplay if you're looking for some more challenge. But really, I mean, an RPG under 20 hours, I'll take it. Absolutely. Jade Cocoon, The Story of Tamamayu's artistic presentation, fusion system, and atmospheric world are just awesome. While it may not appeal to everyone, if you're into Pokemon, I mean Ghostline, and Studio Ghibli, this is one that you might consider.
Get my ass spanked.
It's quite impressive. Now, this next game is similar to Jade Cocoon in that it eventually got a sequel, which kind of helps fight the obscurity, but I also wonder how many people actually knew about the original if they saw the sequel come out. But I actually wonder how many people played the original or knew of the original when the sequel came out. I'm talking about Brigandine, The Legend of Forsena. Brigandine, The Legend of Forsena for the PlayStation 1 is one of the more unique strategy RPGs of its generation. Developed by Hardy Robin and published by Atlas in North America in 1998, Brigandine is large-scale kingdom management with deep tactical battles. It is a lot to chew, to put it plainly. It's a scope that feels bigger than most of its peers. While it didn't get the same level of fanfare as Final Fantasy Tactics or Tactics Ogre, it carved out a cult following thanks to its involved gameplay and insane replay value. Set in the war-torn continent of Forsena, Brigandine lets players pick from one of the 6 nations, each with its own ruler, motivations, and strengths. You could be Sir Leonis, or you could be the Dark Sorceress Kador, but ultimately your goal is the same: unite the continent under your banner. That's the end goal. This structure immediately sets Brigandine apart from other RPGs, giving players strategic freedom over not just the battles, but the overall flow of war. And I'm not here to lie to you, it was overwhelming for me.
Let me tell you why we have Spectrum. I'm on a video chat. Melissa's live streaming with her
Get
audience.
it.
The kids are on their phone streaming while gaming. What screen are you paying attention to?
Fast, reliable internet, starting at $30 a month.
Oh man.
Podcast editing is so frustrating! That's why Riverside makes editing super simple and fast.
Gameplay is split into two phases, organization and attack. During organization, players manage troops, summon monsters,
You know what?
assign commanders called Rune Knights,
I'm a
and
dime
plan
a
their
lot.
conquest. And planning, it certainly is. Lots and lots of planning. Attack phases take place on hex-grid battlefields where players decide where to stick their units, taking advantage... Shoot. I wish I was more mature. But I'm not. Attack phases take place on hex grid battlefields where players decide where to stick their units, taking advantage of terrain if possible, and attack enemy units using magic from the Rune Knights or whatever attack the unit decides it wants to do. Units are a mix of humans and monsters ranging from simple soldiers and knights to wyverns, unicorns, and dragons. Rune Knights act as leaders, and if they fall in battle, the whole army just falls apart. This, of course, makes you question every move. You could end up in some kind of like pyramid of love real quickly and in a real bad way.
Are you in trouble?
The unit leveling system and the ability to capture enemy monsters adds that feeling that's kind of a subtle Pokemon aspect, you know, in building your forces. There's a real thrill in evolving a dragon into a massive, devastating beast, or training a band of humble soldiers or bumbling soldiers into a deadly soldier SWAT team. This being said, it's great to see the results of your training and decisions on the field, but the game's interface can feel clunky by today's standards. And the thing that I found that might turn some people off is probably the same thing that would turn others onto the game. The battles are lengthy. And this can be incredible if you're into that sort of thing, obviously, but if you're looking for a game that's a quick in and out of battle, this is not the game. The battle is the game. Visually, Brigandine is a mixed bag. I tend to be super forgiving regarding this sort of thing, but the unit sprites are colorful and charming, which I appreciate, but their animations can seem a bit stiff for a PS1 sprite. Even when I experienced, the landscapes for the battle can feel a bit repetitive if that matters to you. I actually did really enjoy seeing the differences, though, between the representation of a monster in 2D and the representation of a monster in 3D. As when you get into combat, you shift from 2D to 3D combat, and those dragons are big boys. Very cool. The game's story sequences delivered through static portraits and text are serviceable, but not especially dynamic. As I say pretty often regarding older RPGs, it's just enough to get you motivated to do the combat thing, which is the focus. I personally like the setup for my creepy Rune Knight dude. I like his ambition. What a jerk. Still, the overall tone is helped by a surprisingly strong soundtrack, and I mean that in the greatest way. The music really surprised me with how good it is. It's got those dramatic battle themes and mournful, atmospheric tracks that suit the game's grand ambitions. It's, well, grandiose, like the game is. I'd imagine one of the most appealing things about Brigandine, if you're into this sort of grand combat, is that replayability I mentioned earlier. Each nation offers a slightly different challenge, and different Rune Knights can be recruited or lost during your choices. The game almost feels like a fantasy version of Risk, combined with RPG leveling, and its freeform structure gives players the sense that they are truly shaping the fate of the continent, not just following some kind of pre-written script. Again, if you like Ogre Battle, Risk, maybe Dragon Force, correct me if I'm wrong here, you're likely going to really like Brigandine. It demands patience, and it rewards careful planning, offering a kind of high-stakes fantasy warfare that few games from its era even attempted. If you can look past its dated presentation, you'll find one of the most engrossing tactical experiences on the PlayStation 1, and you'll have plenty of hours worth of meticulous combat to indulge in. And as a note, there is a sequel to this game that came out many years later. It should be more readily available without having to resort to like emulation or high prices on eBay. You know, considering it had a sequel a couple of years ago, I still don't hear a whole lot about it. Not even the sequel. From one obscure game to the next, I guess. The next game shows up on PlayStation 1 RPG lists all the time just for being weird. It's Guardians Crusade. This is definitely an RPG you probably didn't play back in the day, but you might have heard something about recently, especially if you're watching a bunch of RPG videos, maybe even mine. Guardians Crusade is a bright, charming, and surprisingly deep adventure that tried to stand out in a market dominated by moody epics like Final Fantasy VII and Xenogears, games that really focused on some big picture concepts and kicked simplicity to the curb. And there's nothing wrong with that, they just focused on giving a deeper experience. Guardians Crusade was released in 1998 by Tamsoft and published by Activision in the West in 1999. It was known as Knight and Baby in Japan, which is pretty adorable. Just look at that baby. I'm gonna fight the urge to make some Dirty Dancing jokes, but after this one.
That was the summer of 1963. when everybody called me baby and it didn't occur to me to mind.
It mixed simplicity and
Oh,
heartfelt
man.
storytelling in a way that feels both nostalgic and refreshingly sincere. Like saccharine at times, sort of sweet. You play as a young knight named Knight, yeah, really, that's his name, who lives in a peaceful town with his talking fairy companion, Nahani. One day, while delivering a message to the neighboring mayor, Knight finds a cute little pink monster beside the road. Suddenly, an angel-looking thing out of nowhere appears and encourages Knight to deliver the baby to the God's Tower. What starts as a lighthearted escort mission quickly expands into a globe-trotting quest involving ancient gods, dark forces, and lost technologies where, of course, the fate of the world is in your hands. It's simple, and that's not a terrible thing. It just seems to know what it's going for. The narrative eventually does take a few surprisingly mature turns, but never
What do you
loses
got?
its whimsical heart, which is the biggest reason to consider playing Guardians Crusade.
This guy. Oh yeah. Get it. Oh. Oh.
This is Pod 5.
Oh, I got him at least.
First, fully immersive sleep system. Intelligent, adaptive, effortless. It doesn't replace your bed, it transforms it. Pod 5 listens and responds to your needs in real time.
We're going Gyarados.
Temperature, elevation, and sound. While
We're going the big boy.
Built to give you all-night comfort with an adaptive sleep surface that fits onto any mattress to personalize temperature, so you and your partner.
A pretty unique
You get it
aspect
out.
of the game is its visual presentation. It's entirely in 3D, so it's got all those delicious jaggies you come to expect with a PS1 fully 3D game. And it has an art style that resembles a pop-up storybook on a Saturday morning cartoon. And addressing the elephant in the room, it's important to note that the graphics were dated even at release, but the vibrant color palette and consistent design help it hold up in a charming retro sort of way. Enemies appear as adorable toys or strange creatures, maybe even looking a little bit like swimmers. And the environments, while sparse, have a certain fairy tale quality. It's almost like the equivalent in color and design to Quest 64, which I talked about in my N64 RPGs video. Combat is traditional turn-based fare. Enemies appear on the world map as floating ghosts, meaning encounters are avoidable if you're careful. This feature alone makes exploration more enjoyable and less frustrating than many of its peers. Don't want to fight? Run from the swimmers. Knight is your main fighter, but he's not alone for long. Baby becomes a key part of the battle system, evolving over time as you progress through the story. In addition to Baby, you can also summon living toys, collectible allies that provide support, offense, or healing in combat. Think of them as the Pokemon system, sorta, or maybe like summonable creatures in South Park Stick of Truth. Or maybe from that incredibly popular game, Ghostland for the NES. The use of these adds a layer of strategy and charm as they're pretty cute. The game also has a surprisingly robust translation and localization. It's goofy stuff, but hey, it fits. While the original Japanese title suggests something simpler, you know, Knight and Baby, the Western version goes out of its way to inject humor, personality, and even a little satire. It helps the dialogue feel fresh, and the overall story has just enough weight to carry its emotional moments. And this works, as otherwise it's pretty, you know,
I flashed to ulti, but it was on full still, yeah.
That said, Guardians Crusade isn't
Hey, when that
everyone.
happens.
It's relatively easy compared to the more hardcore RPGs, and the graphics are undeniably primitive. It's just a pretty simple game. Due to battle slog and loading and such, the pacing can be a bit slow at times, and some dungeon designs are overly simplistic, feeling more like a chore than a chance for exploration. But these flaws are easy to
Can I do
overlook if
this?
you approach the game with the right mindset. It's a cute RPG, and you should just appreciate it for that. Guardians Crusade is a warm-hearted, unpretentious RPG with a distinct personality. You're saving the world, but it doesn't always have to be so doom and gloom, and this game proves it. Again, appreciate it for what it is, and don't let the darkness in so many RPGs at the time overshadow this one of your priorities. After all,
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
if you've tolerated me this far, consider giving my other content a look. I have a backlog of videos that are very similar to this one, and I'm uploading every 2 weeks. Growth on YouTube has been awesome recently, and I owe it to folks like you. Thank you. Also, consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you've got something out of the video, maybe like you've noted a game you want to play, give me a like. It definitely helps. Let's move on. Hoshigami, Ruining Blue Earth. Hoshigami Ruining Blue Earth is a tactical RPG that wears its ambition like a badge of honor, and I'm here to honor it. Developed by Max 5 and published by Atlas in 2001, kind of a late PS1 game, it attempted to stand among genre-defining titans by introducing several complex systems in a darker, more grounded fantasy tone. What results is a game full of cool ideas, but one that doesn't quite hit that execution. But I don't think it was far from it. For as many things as it gets right, it gets weird. Fortunately, delighting as often as it maybe alienates is the word. The story follows Faz, a young mercenary who becomes embroiled in a conflict surrounding divine relics, ancient gods, and political intrigue in the land of Nightwell. On the surface, it's a standard fantasy setup, but Hoshigami tries to set itself apart with a somber atmosphere and morally gray characters. And I think it does well enough with this. Some of the characters feel a little more flat than they might have intended, but I found it enjoyable, and the mystique of some of the characters is rather intriguing. There's potential for depth, but there might have been some emotional things lost in translation. I'm not quite sure there. I want to think that this game had the best of intentions all around. Where Hoshigami truly sets itself apart is in its gameplay. This isn't a simple pick-up-and-play strategy RPG, though. It demands patience and a willingness to learn its deeply layered mechanics, and I felt I barely skimmed the surface of it all in the time that I spent with it. The RAP, or Ready Action Point system, is the centerpiece of combat, replacing traditional turn-based orders with a time-based initiative meter. Moving around the battlefield takes some points, using action takes some points, using items takes some points. So you can do a combination of different things as long as you don't spend all of your ready action points. This allows you to delay or chain some reactions, creating tactical flexibility, but it also makes planning much more intricate. You have just so many options available to you due to this, and this might be as overwhelming as it is free. One misstep, one miscalculation can leave your team vulnerable for several turns, resulting in brutal punishment from your enemies. The rough thing, too, is that the stakes are incredibly high. If you lose a character in battle, you have a chance to revive them then, but if you don't revive them during the battle, they're gone forever. When you replace characters in your party, like a hiring system, they start back at level 1 and have to be grinded back up to be useful, and then you take the chance on losing them again in the grind. Fortunately, of course, you can save the game often, and just reset as necessary, but holy moly, this game does not pull its punches. I guess it has some of that Fire Emblem permadeath energy going on. When I play Fire Emblem, I play in classic mode, but I am 100% guilty of restarting a battle if I lose specific party members, and I'll be doing the same thing here.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Also unique is the spirit worship system, which determines a character's stat growth, elemental affinity, and even what spells they can learn. Choosing the right deity for each character becomes crucial to success, and the game rarely explains these choices well. It's kind of like a talent tree. You're welcome to change these along the way, but if you're constantly switching, you're unlikely to see the depths of the system in the end. Resource management in this game can be quite challenging as well. Using items can cost you turns and drain your RAP meter, and that makes this a game that demands trial, error, and a certain level of masochism.
Give it to me!
Again, the game's difficulty curve is unrelenting. Even early battles can take nearly an hour, and grinding becomes almost mandatory to survive. There's even a little tower back at the entrance of the game where you can just go to grind experience, which is handy, to be fair. Enemy AI is ruthless, often targeting weaker characters with ruthless efficiency. This one certainly isn't the meat grinder walkers like I mentioned in other games.
You're out!
Hi. Yeah, you've got to go.
Oh shit.
No,
Oh shit.
you did good.
And it's gay. Put it down. Gay. Big gay.
And that's game.
Commercials
This
are
is
gay.
like playing against, at least playing against a mean grade school kid. While the tactics aren't always the most sophisticated, they'll pick off some weak folks every once in a while. While this makes victories feel rewarding, it also risks it being too frustrating to play. I'd warn you that if you're not into these concepts, you can't forgive these issues. Just avoid this one. If you're up to the challenge though, strap on your boots and get prepared for a steep climb. Visually, Hoshigami is on point for me. Now, of course, not everyone is going to agree, but I think it's lovely. I wish we could have had more fluff in the beginning with cutscenes or whatever, but this is still solid. Character sprites are lovely, like the battlefield backgrounds. It might get a little repetitive along the way visually, but it definitely has its charm. The game's presentation looks appropriate for the given time. I mean, it's on point, really on point for 1998-ish, but it's maybe a little less impressive when you consider it came out in 2001 in the US. I mean, I'm absolutely nitpicking about this at the moment though, because I enjoy the style. The soundtrack, as you'd expect from a solid RPG, is on point with a few somber, atmospheric tracks that complement the game's serious tone. Now, it isn't especially memorable, but it gets the job done and it complements the game well. I am a champion for this game now. Given what I've experienced of it, it's a respectable RPG that belongs among the mentions of the majors for the PS1. Maybe as an A or B tier label rather than an S tier, but it's respectable. For hardcore fans of tactical RPGs who enjoy mastering complex systems and aren't afraid of punishing difficulty, there's definitely something here for you. But for many folks, the game's steep learning curve and cryptic mechanics may turn you off a little bit. Hoshigami Ruining Blue Earth reaches for greatness, but lands somewhere closer to a, hey, that's the spirit sort of value. It's a bit of a niche experience, best suited for strategy veterans, as I said, looking for something different. And that's probably what relegated it to.
We're in attack speed Bard.
This next game is also really daggone obscure as we're continuing to get a little more obscure. I kind of overlooked this game about 100 times thinking it was Master of Monsters, but it's not. But with a name like this, what could go wrong? Monster Seed. Released in 1999 in the US by Sunsoft, Monster Seed is bad.
Monster Seed is bad.
Sorry, that's not fair. Let's do that again.
Stick to the script.
Released in 1999 by Sunsoft, Monster Seed is a PlayStation RPG that never quite got the attention that it may have deserved. Now think about that sentence though. Not all attention is good. Monster Seed is obscure, undeniably rough around the edges and often clunky, but to be fair, beneath its strange exterior lies a unique monster breeding system that's not horribly complicated. It has some enjoyable tactical combat, and a gameplay loop that can be surprisingly compelling for the right kind of player. It may not have the polish or fanfare of Pokemon or Final Fantasy, but Monster Seed offers a rewarding, if often frustrating, experience for those willing to waller around in it for a while. I missed Monster Seed back in the day. I probably saw it mentioned briefly in a magazine or something and thought it mentally under Pokemon or Monster Rancher knockoff, or maybe Master of Monsters again. And you know what, I moved on. But revisiting it now, I realize it's doing something slightly different than I anticipated. Rather than collecting pre-existing monsters, you create your own from scratch using mysterious monster seeds and elemental essences. Some real Pokemon meets Frankenstein sort of stuff going on here.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
There's of course the Monster Rancher-like experimentation here that feels half science project, half alchemy, and it's this monster creation system that gives the game its identity. You play as Daniel, a seed master with the ability to summon monsters. The story is standard RPG fare, involving political intrigue, secret organizations, and underground monster tournaments. It's not especially deep or emotionally resonant, but it gives just enough context to keep you engaged. Why am I going to the back room of this place in town and hatching little monsters? Because I have to go to this strange castle, of course. The real focus here is on the monsters themselves, though, and how you grow and command them. The core gameplay loop revolves around breeding and customizing monsters. Ew. Then deploying them in turn-based, grid-based combat at different locales in the world, where the story is an excuse to go jack some people up. While the battle system can feel slow and the interface is clunky, there's a real strategy involved, especially once your custom monsters start to show their strength. Monster types vary widely in appearance and behavior, and discovering new combinations can be genuinely satisfying. There's a learning curve, and the game doesn't go out of its way to explain those monster mechanics at all. But once you get the hang of it, there's a rewarding rhythm to building a team, testing them in combat, losing a few brothers in arms, and refining your approach.
You about to die? Salute you!
That said, Monster Breed is sort of fun after a while, but it's also just sort of bad. The graphics are functional, and I find them cute, but it's probably going to turn some folks off. There are sometimes dark and muddy environments and stiff character animations that reflect the PS1's early 3D growing pains, even though the PS1 had been out for a while already when this game came out. The menus are awkward to navigate, monster stats are not always clearly explained, like, what the heck are you supposed to do with temperature? What? How does that affect anything? And pacing can sort of drag in places, including right in the beginning when the chief in town asks you to literally fight every person that's a low rank in the local monster arena before he'll give you a real location to go to. This game is not a user-friendly experience, especially early on. You'll spend more time than you'd like fumbling through menus and experimenting blindly before things start to click. The best and the worst aspect of this game, though, is the incredibly, laughably bad translation for it. Holy moly, look at this.
Great news, Spectrum Internet customers. Now you can try Spectrum Mobile risk-free for a full year at no cost to you.
Sometimes it's really sad how bad it is, but often it's a solid belly laugh for me to wade through this dialogue. Jeez. Monster Seed attempts something strange and ambitious. It's not always successful, but the attempt itself is admirable, I suppose. Once I got past the initial clunkiness, I found myself genuinely enjoying the core gameplay. There's a satisfaction in raising your own monsters, shaping them through trial and error, and watching them thrive in battle or, die in battle, especially when they're shouting stuff like die in hell or whatever at their enemies. They just grow up so fast. Mustard Seed's not a hidden masterpiece, but it is an interesting, overlooked title that takes risks with its mechanics and world building. If you're into offbeat RPGs and don't mind a little awkwardness in exchange for creative ideas, it's worth a look. If you love bad translations, this is the place to go. Welcome. It is far from perfect, from perfect, but in its own peculiar way, it earns its place among the weirder, more experimental RPGs of the PS1 era. You know what is a hidden masterpiece? Both of these next two games. Holy smokes. This next game I had seen for years, and I've owned it for years, and I prided myself on knowing what it was, but I kept putting it off and putting it off. The next to last game in the terms of obscurity, by my understanding, is Cardia, The Word of Fate. Released in 1998 by Atlas, Cardia, The Word of Fate is a tactical RPG that stands out for its distinct visual style, unconventional magic system, and dual protagonist narrative. It flew under the radar compared to genre heavyweights like Final Fantasy Tactics that released just a few months prior. But Cardia is unique in that it fuses traditional grid-based strategy gameplay with a heavily stylized world steeped in text-based magic and philosophical undertones. And to be honest, I slept on this one for too long. Don't get me wrong, I wanted this game back in the day when I played Final Fantasy Tactics. I played Tactics, I absolutely loved it. I saw Cardia, Word of Fate in a magazine and thought, that looks awesome. That looks just like Tactics. And really, that assertion isn't far off. Cardia defenders may hate this, but if Final Fantasy Tactics is Coke, Cardia is Coke Zero, and that's not a bad thing. The game's story unfolds through two separate campaigns, each 18 chapters long. One following the noble warrior Lacrima Christi, a devout shrine maiden of order, which I played for this video, and the other starring Toxa Classico, a free-spirited knight with a rebellious streak, which I haven't touched yet. The player chooses one protagonist at the beginning, with both narratives eventually converging on the same grand mystery, the misuse and consequences of Cardia, a mystical script capable of shaping reality. This branching structure gives Cardia replayability and depth, especially since each campaign offers a different emotional tone. From what I understand, Toxa is more personal and impulsive, while Lacrima is restrained and dutiful. Again, I played Lacrima, and I have been loving it. Cardia, the concept, was a bit of a boring thing to me at first, but the more the story explains it, the more interesting it really becomes. These people have cards that say something like, water or whatever, and when they use it, it becomes water. Same for fire, and just everything. Some people in the world use it freely, and others see it as blasphemy. And still others see creating human-like people using it as the only real taboo for it. But some people still summon monsters and such using Cardia. And this is some compelling stuff, really, like just the different approaches to this idea of this magic. Cardia is also, as noted before, a system. It's a system of magic. Instead of learning spells through leveling up, players craft Cardia using text-based formulas and item synthesis. It's a little overwhelming at first, but you can kind of break it down and understand as you go. 3 types of Cardia exist. There's text, silk, and mithril, and these are used to summon creatures called phantoms. They're used to cast elemental magic, or they're used to forge powerful equipment. This approach makes preparation and experimentation crucial. Building the right army or having the right spell at the right moment often determines success, giving Cardia a cerebral edge over other strategy games of its time. Now, I was worried that this was a bit overwhelming at first, and it kind of was, but I feel that the game allows you to get in there and mess around with it without punishing you too much for making mistakes. You can simply, during combat, use Cardia for spells if necessary, or you can use Cardia to create items for your party and equip them during combat. While the Cardia is limited, you're awarded more Cardia after battles, and after a few fights, I didn't feel too anxious about using them. I am an item hoarder in RPGs, and admitting your problems is the first step, however. But this game made me feel free to use resources after I got comfortable with it. The grid-based combat is fairly standard, but that's not a bad thing. It works. It works. Units move across terrain with turn-based precision, engaging enemies using a simple weapon triangle. Sword beats axe, axe beats spear, spear beats sword, and magic. The ability to summon disposable phantoms gives a player tactical versatility, as I was making monsters and sending them straight into the grinder. Sorry boys, better you than me. That's an important thing in this game. While your characters are powerful, and certainly they feel so, the minions are just as important. If one of your human party members dies, that's a game over screen. With this, there's a deliberate pace to the gameplay that may feel sluggish compared to games like Tactics Ogre or Fire Emblem, but the layering of strategic elements, positioning, summoning, spellcrafting, keeps battles engaging for fans of the genre. It's a little more complex than those other games, and that's not a terrible thing. I'm a simple man myself, but I appreciated the freedom in these battles and the added layers of depth to the gameplay via these systems. Visually, Cardia is notable for its hand-drawn art style, with character designs from famed Final Fantasy illustrator Yoshitaka Amano. It's beautiful. The in-game sprites are kind of modest, but the character portraits and storybook presentation give the game a dreamlike, mythic quality. It's not bad. Maybe it's a little jarring at first, given the difference between the portraits and the sprites, but it works fine and establishes its own distinct style. The script is awesome. I was so impressed with their localization, and in my experience, it was rarely obtuse or silly, which again is rare for the time. It seems to preserve the philosophical weight and political intrigue at the heart of the narrative, though I'd likely have to beat the game to guarantee that. Still, if it's a bad translation, if it's a goofy translation, it's certainly got the wool pulled over my eyes. The soundtrack is beautiful and atmospheric, featuring somber, medieval-inspired melodies that complement the game's mood of melancholy and mystery. I dare say there's not many flaws to this game. It seems to focus on telling an intellectual story over an emotional tone, and I'm okay with that. It feels different, but in a great way, standing the test of time. The characters are interesting, but the story sometimes holds them at arm's length in favor of abstract themes, but again, that's sort of neat. And the strategic depth, while rewarding, may be off-putting to players expecting faster-paced action, but as a huge fan of Final Fantasy Tactics, it's only slightly slower in my opinion. Cardia: The Word of Fate is an underrated gem. I'm comfortable in saying that. The game only sold about 60,000 copies in the US, which was lower than its slightly over 100,000 in Japan, so it makes sense that it's obscure. That's a pretty low print run in my understanding, despite it being considered a success by the company. Cardia is thoughtful, distinctive, and quietly ambitious. It may not shout for your attention, but for those who listen, the game has a lot to say, and I'm excited to get back into it. And that's probably the best compliment I can give it. This next game's story is very, very common. It's one you've definitely heard and seen represented in other places, but it might be a game you've not even heard of and you're not familiar with. In collecting PS1 games over the years, I've only seen maybe 2 copies of this game, despite working in video game stores, and despite having been collecting for over 15 years. The most obscure US release RPG that I found on the PlayStation, and the best game on this list in my experience so far, is Sayuki Journey West. Sayuki Journey West is a tactical RPG that adapts the classic Chinese novel Journey to the West into a mythic, anime-styled adventure. At a time when the PlayStation library was bursting with genre-defining titles, Sayuki flew under the radar. But for fans of grid-based strategy games with spiritual and cultural flair, this one is absolutely a stranger banger. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I don't know. Stranger banger is not an appropriate
that's the wrong one.
hidden gem. We're gonna stick with hidden gems. You play as Sanzo, a young monk chosen by the heavens to make a pilgrimage to the west, guided by visions and protected by a colorful crew of companions, each loosely inspired by characters from the original legend. Players familiar with the lore will recognize Wukong the Monkey King, the warrior Goku, and others, but here they're filtered through an early 2000s anime lens, complete with transformation abilities and magic-heavy battles. The characters don't shy away from developing lovable character traits. It's really quite awesome. The gameplay is turn-based tactical fare in the vein of Final Fantasy Tactics. It sort of also just looks like Tactics as well, and that's not a bad thing. Characters move across the grid, cast spells, and perform physical attacks. One of Sayuki's key mechanics is the ability for party members to transform into monstrous, powerful versions of themselves called wereforms. These transformations come with boosted stats and unique attacks, offering a rewarding strategic layer to battles. You have to decide for yourself when it's best to use these super powerful abilities and when to save them. I like to throw caution to the wind and open big, baby. The best defense is a good offense. Now, what sets Sayuki apart isn't just the combat, it's the atmosphere. The game leans hard into its mythological inspirations, presenting a world steeped in Eastern philosophy, demons, and gods. Towns, temples, and forests feel like storybook illustrations brought to life with a watercolor-style palette. While the in-game sprites are lovely in themselves, the artwork and portrait illustrations are so excellent and expressive, lending emotional weight to character interactions. It's such an awesome touch, especially given some of the more recent character portraits I've been, seeing in this list. Magic plays a central role in both the narrative and the gameplay, as it's used by the protagonist to control Goku and keep him in check, which I never personally experienced having to do in the time that I spent with it. Players are encouraged to use elemental spells, status effects, and buffs strategically. Each character aligns with a specific element: fire, wind, earth, water, light, dark, that sort of thing, and smart elemental pairings can shift the tide of battle. While the challenge level isn't insane, I found it challenging enough to be careful on the battlefield. It'd be easy to get carried away smacking people and forget to heal and buff your troops and just find yourself dead. I thought a neat addition to the game was the ability to manipulate certain things on the battlefield too, like knocking down bridges and that sort of thing. You don't really see that too often. I can't think of another RPG, a tactical RPG, where that happens. If you know of one, please let me know. It's a neat concept. It's the first time I remember seeing it on PlayStation 1. It has a neat little mechanic of knocking down a bridge in the beginning in the first battle to keep your enemies from following you. I think that's a really neat thing, a neat tactical flourish to add. The localization is solid for the era, from what I experienced. The story shines through well with themes of redemption, duty, and spiritual growth that give the game a more emotional depth than one might expect. While Sanzo starts out a bit bland, their journey gradually becomes more personal and meaningful, especially as their companions grow closer and face their own inner demons. The music deserves praise as well. It's serene, it's mystical, and evocative, with tracks that range from meditative temple themes to dramatic boss music. It supports the tone of the game beautifully. I can't fault a thing regarding the music. It is appropriately solid. Sayuki Journey West, or Dragon Ball, or Wukong, Black Myth Wukong, whatever you want to call it, like this story, it's well represented here. I'm impressed. This may not be the flashiest tactical RPG on the PlayStation, but it's quietly powerful, which makes me wonder, why was it so overlooked? From what I could find, it looks like the game only sold something along the lines of 50,000 copies worldwide, 30,000 in Japan, and 20,000 in the US. And this is a shame, for sure, as it's such a solid game. If you liked Final Fantasy Tactics and you like Dragon Ball Z, you're likely really going to enjoy this title. It's one of those games that once you've witnessed its mythological heart, cool transformation mechanics, and consistently engaging battles, it's hard to forget, despite being one of the most obscure PS1 RPGs.
We're from the farm. That's why we prep fresh ingredients, so we're ready to cook for you. Farmer Boy's Farm Stand menu stands for fresh and affordable meals, with 5 new choices starting at just $9.99. Farmer Boys.
I've got 2 life pro tips for you. 1, you could save hundreds on car insurance by switching to Mercury. 2, get luggage that's easy to recognize. Makes baggage claim a breeze. Mercury.
Which would you prefer, eternal life or unlimited wealth? How about both?
Eternal life.
For that, you need the Philosopher's Stone, a substance that can turn base metals into gold and grant you eternal life. The Book of Aquarius contains the instructions for the Philosopher's Stone. Now, although the process can take years, the ingredients are simple. You have them in your home right now. But the Book of Aquarius is derived from many older texts, including one very mysterious artifact, the Emerald Tablet, which contains not only the recipe for immortality, but the secret to everything in the universe. This knowledge has been around for centuries, but has been suppressed, until now. Medieval alchemists received this knowledge from the Arabs 1,000 years ago. The Arabs got it from the Egyptians 2,000 years before that. But the Egyptians received this knowledge 36,000 years ago, from the most advanced culture on Earth. The Emerald Tablet comes from Atlantis. For hundreds of years, the recipe for the Philosopher's Stone was the most sought-after secret of alchemy. According to legend, this substance could turn ordinary metals like lead and iron into gold. The Philosopher's Stone was also called the Elixir of Life because it could restore youth and even grant immortality. For centuries, alchemists attempted to create the stone, breaking down, distilling, and combining different materials in pursuit of this goal. This actually led to the creation of chemistry. Now, this might sound like hocus pocus, but some of the most brilliant minds in history believed in the Philosopher's Stone and dedicated a large portion of their lives in pursuit of it. Some became so infatuated that it drove them to the brink of insanity. Isaac Newton is remembered for his contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and physics, but he was also interested in alchemy. Newton spent the last 30 years of his life obsessed with the Philosopher's Stone. He even made his own translations of the Emerald Tablet, which are still studied today. Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II brought the best alchemists in Europe to court. Men like John Dee and Edward Kelly were given a private lab and an unlimited budget. At the beginning of the Renaissance, there was an alchemist who, as the legend goes, actually discovered the Philosopher's Stone, and his name was Nicholas Flamel. Now
he gave it to Dumbledore.
What?
Well, he actually puts it in Gringotts Vault, and then Hagrid fetched it for him.
I don't think that's...
But Voldemort wants it, because he's stuck in the back of Quirrell's head, right? Then Hermione gets them past the Devil's Snare, and then Ron plays Wizard's Chess. By the way, he used the Nimzowitsch defense as an opening gambit. You don't see that much with Wizard's Chess.
Now, if you believe in the legend or Harry Potter, Nicholas Flamel didn't die in 1418. He succeeded in creating the Philosopher's Stone, and he and his wife Perenelle are still alive and out there somewhere.
Whoa, 600 years is a long time to be married.
I guess it is.
A long time.
Mm-hmm.
So very long. A long time.
Ever since man realized that his life was finite, The human race has been fascinated with the idea of extending their lifespan or even achieving immortality. The legend of the Fountain of Youth has been around for hundreds of years, and now we have cryonics, which is freezing a body at the moment of death in the hope of reviving them at some point in the future, or mind uploading, which will transfer a person's consciousness to a computer and then at some point transfer that consciousness back into a human or part human, part robot body. But it all started with the Emerald Tablet. Written by the Egyptian god Jehudi, more commonly known as Thoth. Thoth was one of the most important gods of ancient Egypt. He was worshipped before the age of the pharaohs, so before 5000 BC. Thoth was the god of magic, wisdom, and the moon. He was usually depicted as a man with the head of an ibis.
IBS?
Ibis.
What'd I say?
Thoth created writing and hieroglyphics. He wrote the Egyptian Book of the Dead. The Egyptians claimed he invented science, religion, philosophy, and of course, alchemy. Greeks call him the inventor of astronomy, mathematics, civilized government, and the alphabet.
Kind of an overachiever, this Egyptian, eh?
Well, that's what's interesting. Thoth wasn't actually a god. He wasn't even Egyptian. He arrived in Egypt many thousands of years ago, and he brought with him knowledge and wisdom from his own country.
Which is?
Thoth is from Atlantis.
Yahtzee!
Grammarly is basically like an
Well,
AI
they're
writing
psychic,
partner
yes,
that
they're
can help you
psychic.
solve all of this. For example, here's a bunch of stuff that I just wrote about Hazel. I can ask Grammarly to improve it, or to shorten it, or to make it more engaging. And let me tell you, working on a game engine, there are so many different terms to keep track of, and that's where Grammarly's style guide comes in. It's like the perfect thing to make sure that everything is cohesive and consistent across all of your branding. You can use the style guide to build up this entire dictionary of various different definitions and terms that your team uses. This is particularly useful and important for anything that is public facing. It can make sure that your brand, your team delivers everything consistently and cohesively across all of the different authors that might actually write that content. And along that same line, you can also set brand tones to help ensure that your team's communication aligns with your brand. And this is specifically talking about the
Plato described Atlantis as being divided into 10 kingdoms, each with its own government, its own rulers, and its own purpose. One of these kingdoms was the island of Undal, which was the Atlantean center of philosophy and science. Thoth was born
Back for some more games. Let's get it. Group. I'll take. Play the game right now.
slain. Shut down.
Be careful with that. True eyes is powerful stuff.
Try to fix something else, but doing this is not working. I need to fix this real quick.
Rome lives another day. Throw them into the abyss. If you have problems, you come to me.
I think I finished it too this year.
It's very important to take time to rest.
you viewers. No thanks, man. Appreciate it. Come in. There you go.
An enemy has been slain.
Take the blade. Always trust bro.
An ally has been slain.
Be careful with that. Blue eyes is how to start. The darker the night, brighter the stars.
An ally has been slain. Enemy double kill.
I need to go heal.
Killing spree. Shut down.
Rome lives another day. You lure him here, I'll kill him. That's the plan.
Rockin' for sure. Physics. Damn.
Enemy double kill. Aced. Your turret has been destroyed. Your inhibitor has been destroyed. Executed.
That old man across the bridge is a damn fool.
Don't get cocky.
The song between us.
Enemy has been slain. Ally has been slain. Ally has been slain. Double kill. Ace. An enemy has been slain. Sail. An enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain. Put your guard down. An ally has been slain. Shut down. An ally has been slain.
Well, it's a good hunt to end it.
Slain an enemy. An ally has been slain. Your inhibitor is respawning soon.
Good grabber.
An ally has been slain.
What?
Your inhibitor
What?
has respawned. An enemy has been slain.
We took Freljord. We took Valor. Everywhere we went, men trembled, and the ice followed
Done.
us. We
I'm going to the end of my stream.
empire,
probably gonna lose before. Ready?
Be careful with that. True ice is powerful stuff.
I've got a good feeling about this.
Anyone? Here, who's that? Who is that? Wow. He just lost. Through the game with no shame. Billy Jane, do the thing. That ain't my baby. That ain't my baby. Mwah. Are you my baby? Say good game. Say good game. Good game. Good game.